the Palestinian land getting smaller and smaller. You could just see this massive move. What happened? It's like, what the heck? Within 2 years, all of a sudden, you know, the people that owned 100% of the land now own 5% of the land, now own 10% of the land, whatever the percentage is. Now own a very small percentage of the land. And not only that, but the land is divided. You have Gaza Strip, this little piece of toothpick right over here called the Gaza Strip. You have the West Bank over here, you have East Jerusalem for that matter. It's a divided piece of land. Why don't you think that the Palestinians are going to stop with this? Again, regardless of who's right or wrong, we have to assume that the people that were in those territories are not going to be happy. Another major assumption, another major argument that's thrown out there is that the land was sold. But come on, let's also kind of play some logic here, all right? I'll go with you. Let's just say some land was sold. Let's just say a lot of land was sold. Was 80% of the land sold? So every Palestinian all of a sudden hated their own country and wanted to sell their land? 80% of the land was sold? That doesn't make sense either. I'll go with you. I'll say a small percentage was sold. I'll say there was a lot of sellouts who were Palestinians. I'll say there was a lot of sellouts who were Muslims, sure. And they just didn't want to deal with the headache of someone taking over their country. All right. But you're telling me 80%, 90% of the land was sold? So brothers and sisters, this is what happened post-1948. This is basically the situation that we're in today. Just keep in mind it's a bit smaller. So as time goes along, as wars happen, as this idea and this propaganda machine, you don't hear this about the Israeli propaganda machine. This is just the idea that Israel is right in everything they do. As we go further into the future, you'll find the Palestinian territories getting smaller and smaller. And we'll talk about the occupied territories in Palestine today, in the West Bank, these settlements and so on, in just a bit. Is everyone okay so far? Is my tone okay? Are we good? We're okay so far? I know you probably have a lot of questions and comments, but are we good to go a little further? Or do we want to wrap up soon? I'm literally asking, we're good? Good. All right, cool. Yes?
Will you be discussing 1967?
I'm sorry?
Will you be discussing 1967?
Will I be discussing 1967? No. Would you like me to?
Well, I think it's an important part of the history of the country.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's why the country is split.
It's why the country is split. Okay, that's an interesting view. We're not going to be going into the details of 1967. If you'd like, towards the end, I would be more than happy to sit down with you and go over the details with you if you'd like.
Well, if you're talking about the history of Palestine, you should talk about the 1967 war.
Thank you very much. So next slide. And I say that sincerely, by the way. I really appreciate your comment. But for today's presentation, there's a lot we have to cover, so we'll skip over that. So recognizing the two narratives, and there really are two narratives to this discussion. Palestinians feel very deeply about their narrative. Muslims feel very deeply about their narrative. So the Palestinian narrative, 20th century Jewish immigration. All of a sudden, their narrative is, hey, out of nowhere, we have a bunch of Jews coming into Palestine. What are you going to do? There was a ton of people coming into Palestine from all over the place in 1940s, 1930s, and 1950s. So there's a massive Jewish immigration into Palestine. Number one. Number two, the Nakba of 1948. You have the largest refugee population in the world, undisputed, largest refugee population in the world, with 4.5 million Palestinians throughout the world that are refugees today, because of this event. Because of this event. They didn't freely go on a vacation for 50 years, for 63 years. They're not still continuously on a long vacation or hiatus from their homes. A lot literally got kicked out. A lot of them moved out because they didn't want to get involved with the battle. A lot of them probably left on their own. 4.5 million people, refugee population in the world today. The 63-year occupation of the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, and really the rest of the territories for that matter. What the Palestinians will call basically jacked our land. All right? Put it like that. A spiritual connection to the Holy Land. This is the Palestinian narrative. This can be applied to Muslims, Jews, and Christians alike, because they're all Palestinian for that matter. All right? The Islamic narrative would obviously say there's a spiritual connection that is Islamic, some sort of Muslim spiritual connection that is related to Allah, that is related to the Quran, and to the history as we see it. The Jewish narrative. So, history of Jewish persecution. The Jews have been persecuted over and over again in almost every situation, no matter where they've lived. And for some reason, it's so funny, I was just reading this book today. It's A Complete Idiot's Guide to Understanding Judaism. Don't make fun of me. I actually appreciate books like that. I have other books on Judaism as well, but this one struck my eye. The guy who wrote it, Rabbi Matt something, I can't believe I forgot his name. I was just reading it today. Hardcore Zionist, he wrote the book, and it was very interesting. I was learning a lot about Judaism in terms of its practices or applications and stuff. And one of the things that he was saying is, no matter where we've lived, we've always been screwed. And this is, something that kind of stuck in my mouth. I figured I was like, I'm going to share that today. And it's sad, I don't say that, by the way, I don't mean to laugh. It's just a sad narrative. The Holocaust. So before all of this commotion of Israel and Palestine, we can't forget there was a massive Holocaust of 6 million Jews being slaughtered in the hands of a fanatical extremist. A fanatical extremist terrorist who was not Muslim, and his name was Hitler. Israel as a Jewish safe haven. From the Jewish narrative, this is basically and this really connects to the last part, the spiritual connection to the Holy Land. Israel is viewed as the Jewish safe haven. It's kind of like the Jews had a kingdom there, they had kings there, and this is really the birthplace of Judaism. Abraham was there, Moses was there, a lot of the prophets were there. So this is our safe haven. This is what the Jews believe to be their kind of homeland, so to speak. Okay? Next slide. Now I get a little bit more into the daily routine of Israel and Palestine. I like to compare things. I think when you see comparisons, sometimes you are able to kind of distinguish between, or sometimes you're able to paint a better picture of both sides when you see some comparisons, right? So let's talk about the economy. Because the Palestinians, they have unlimited money, and unlimited money means unlimited rockets and bombs, and so they can just bomb the heck out of every Israeli that ever lived. And so this is a very, again, a disgusting myth that they just have an unlimited source of money. Palestine's economy is basically in shambles. It's one of the worst economies in the world. And the UN has classified their economy, literally I think one UN chief said it's in shambles. I think he literally says that. Their GDP is $12 billion. Israel's GDP is $217 billion. It's a very strong economy. They obviously suffered in the past in this recent economic depression, so to speak. Israel also suffered. They had forecasts of $218 billion, but this past year, 2010, $217 billion. My source, by the way, again, you can see my sources at the bottom, just so you guys are on the same page. CIA World Fact Book, whether you think that's credible or not. I found some other estimates saying Israel's GDP is 220, some others saying 215. So I stuck with the CIA, whatever. They're not crazy credible for me because of other reasons. They're very shady when they do things, but we'll stick with them on this stuff. Per capita, 30 grand per capita, all right? For Israel, $2,900 is the per capita, per capita per citizen. So you're really saying 10 years for a Palestinian to make as much as an Israeli. It will take 10 years for a Palestinian to make as much as an Israeli in 1 year. It would take them 10 years, all right? The annual budget is $60 billion. The annual budget for Palestine is 1.8. Keep in mind, one thing that I have a hard time distinguishing is because nobody recognizes Palestine as a sovereign nation, so to speak. The CIA definitely doesn't. So they split up the West Bank and Gaza Strip. So Gaza Strip, they had their own GDP for them, or their own section. And the West Bank had their own, which really didn't make too much sense. The unemployment in Israel is 6%. Unemployment in the West Bank is 28%. In Gaza Strip, it is 40%. Half of the population is unemployed. Half of the population is unemployed. I mean, do you think they would like to waste their time just they would like to waste their whole day? Their goal in life is to waste their whole day just attacking Israel? I mean, really anyone with just some sort of logic here. Do you think that anyone in their right mind would just waste their whole day, their entire years of life with 40% unemployment? Because they have nothing better to do to just go and attack Israel all day? I mean, that's some deep hatred there. That's some deep hatred for someone to do that. Did you have a question?
Have you been there?
I've been to parts of Palestine, yeah.
Have you been to the West Bank?
West Bank, no.
I have.
Okay.
There's a mall there.
Okay?
And do you know that Yasser Arafat was receiving billions of dollars from foundations in this country
I do.
to build up Gaza Strip?
I do. Yasser Arafat received a lot of money to do a lot of things. And at the end of the day, it all went to Arab here, to his pocket. And this is one thing that sucks about a lot of Arab rulers. And I think this is a great point, by the way. Thank you very much for bringing this up. One thing that you'll see with the Arab population, with a lot of the Arabs these days, is you finally get to see the true Arab. All right? You don't see this fanatical extremist. You see the Egyptian guy in the street, Christian or Muslim, Coptic or Muslim, whatever, that's just fighting against this dummy. I already forgot his name. Mubarak, yeah, sorry. Find this is dummy Mubarak. You find the Libyans, all right? They can't even own guns. They don't own weapons in Libya. If you're caught with a weapon, there's a big law against that. In most Arab countries, by the way, if you didn't know this, weapons are generally not allowed. A lot of these Arab rulers and a lot of these so-called Muslim rulers were very corrupt. And I think the PA is probably one of the most corrupt organizations because it was really founded by Israel, which is another corrupt organization. But thank you very much for bringing that point up. And I want to make that clear. The presentation today is not against Jews or just this idea. It's against really injustice. And whether it be injustice from Yasser Arafat or from anyone for that matter, or from the Palestinian Muslims for that matter, we need to speak up against that. But moving on, thank you guys for bringing that up. Unemployment, 28%, in the Gaza Strip, 40%. Below poverty, you have 70% of the population in the Gaza Strip below the poverty line. Below the poverty line. And this is the poverty line that was set either individually by each country or by the United Nations. Below the poverty line in Israel, 23%. A good chunk of the population. Most of those that are under the poverty line in Israel are Arabs. Next slide. Next slide, sorry. So, military comparison. I want to say I'm sorry I couldn't get 2010 or 2011 figures on this. So these figures are actually from 2003, 2004. So we would assume that the military actually has grown. But I want to make that very clear because these aren't up-to-date, accurate figures for 2010. The source is the Center for Strategic and International Studies. They have some documents I had to pay membership to get into. I didn't have the time or money to do that. So anyways, Israel, we have some 4,000 battle tanks. All right, the Palestinians, how many battle tanks do they have? How many Palestinian battle tanks have you seen roaming the streets, taking out the Israelis one by one? 0. Combat aircraft, 438. We've seen their combat aircraft in the recent Gaza massacre. 440 aircraft. Artillery, some 1,500. Their military expenditure in 2001 was, actually, I'm sorry, this is wrong. This is 2010 figure. It was 7% of their GDP. So if you just take their GDP, take 7% of that. This is accurate 2010. It's $15 billion. $15 billion, their military expenditures. Official active forces, 176,000. The Palestinians have 35,000. If that, the majority of their official active forces are really policemen. All right, when they lump this figure of official active forces, they're really talking about the policemen, and they even lump up fire department in active forces. In Arab countries, they do this for some reason, which is beyond me. But you'll see, like, the policemen have more power than the army does. It's a very different way of governance that they have in a lot of Arab countries. The military expenditure for Palestine, by the way, this is from the West Bank. I do not know if this is accurate. It says 85 million. It was published in the Center for Strategic and International Studies. I don't know if that's accurate today. Next slide. So the Jerusalem, it's okay. We can go to the next slide. So U.S. foreign aid to Israel. I think this should really kind of make us all a little mad, regardless of whether you're pro or con again. This should make you a little, this should make you at the very least question why we're giving so much support to Israel. I remember I was a college student. My tuition, I went to Cal Poly, you guys heard that? My tuition was some some $530 when I got it in 2002. $530 for the whole year. $500. I'm sorry, that's a lot. Per quarter. I said $500 for the whole year. That doesn't make sense. $500 a quarter. I'm talking to my Cal Poly students today. How much is tuition? July, where you at? Almost $2,000 of tuition, all right? That's, what, 9 years? It's jumped some 45 billion percentage points. That's ridiculous. And we're giving foreign aid of $85 billion to Israel in the past 63 years. $85 billion from our taxpayer money. Why? All I want is a why. All I want is you to answer the simple question, our dear U.S. government, why are we giving them so much? Why are we giving them $3 billion a year in grants? This is not in loans. This is not in, you're going to pay back with some interest. This is in grants. Beyond that, we give them military aid as well. $3 billion a year? We honestly can't use that money over here in our country? We can't use it for healthcare, we can't use it for the poor, we can't use it to give students aid to come to campuses because the UC Regents can't, make up their minds on how much they're going to hike up tuition again? Honestly? $3 billion going to a country that's causing us so much drama? Regardless of whether, again, you're pro-Israel or not. It's causing us drama. The country is giving us a lot of headaches. So why are we giving so much money to Israel? Over 63 years, we've given them $85 billion. You have a question?
Yeah, Paul, answer this.
Yeah, part of the problem to answer that question is that...
It was actually a rhetorical question.
Yeah, well, in the Hamas Charter, it states that Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it.
Yeah.
Do you condemn the Hamas Charter that contains this type of hateful rhetoric?
All right, thank you for your comment. So, I'm sorry I'm not going to answer that question because it was a rhetorical question, but with a question like that, we can keep it to the end because we haven't really talked about that yet.
Well, that addresses the aid that we give to Israel because Islam, according to the Hamas Charter, wants to obliterate it. Israel is the United States' greatest democratic ally in that region.
So, the logic is that since Israel's the greatest democratic ally, because Egypt was not, because Saudi Arabia was not, an ally in that region, because
Democratic
was not an ally in that region, because all of those other countries were not allies in the region. Your argument is that Israel, because it's a democratic ally, then we get to give them $3 billion a day.
Well, do you condemn the Hamas
So I
Charter?
don't agree with your statement, so I'll go ahead and move on. But I do
Is that a
appreciate
yes
your
or a no?
I promise you I'll address that.
Thank you.
I promise you I'll. Thank you for your question. Thank you. Next. All right, so the conflict has taken 7,000 lives, and I don't want to distinguish between Israeli lives or Palestinian lives or Muslim or Jewish lives or Christian lives, but 7,000 lives, all right? The majority obviously Palestinian, but it's taken lives nonetheless. It's taken children nonetheless. It's taken grandmas and grandpas nonetheless. It's taken some of my friends, some of my personal friends that have died in the conflict in Palestine. It's taking away family members, not my family members, but of my dear friends that I know. It's taking a lot of their family members as well. 7,000, this is within 10 years. Within 10, 12 years, 7,000 to 8,000, 9,000 lives have been taken away because of this conflict. The majority Palestinian, obviously because you've seen the military expenditures of Israel, so naturally when you come in rock versus tank, the tank is going to blow more things up. And it's probably going to cause a little more collateral damage. Again, this is just logic, right? Moving on to the next slide. Okay, thank you. So, can you click twice there? Oh, that's good. So, when we talk about occupation, occupation is an interesting concept. So you guys remember when I was talking about my house, and someone coming into my house and taking my master bedroom. I really like my master bedroom. My furniture is from IKEA, and I appreciate Swedish products. It's gray, but you don't find a lot of gray, what's it called? Dressers, thank you. You don't find a lot of gray dressers out there. My wife likes gray. I appreciate it. So this guy, person, whenever comes into my house and occupies, takes over my room, my master bedroom. All right, and maybe even the bathroom too. So I can't even, go to the bathroom in my own house. So this is the occupation. I wake up in the morning and they're still there. I leave at night. I leave from work at night, come back home, they're still there. I make breakfast in the morning and they're still there. And they even put a fence around me. All right, and they're still there in my house. This is called occupation. This is like, oh my God. This is like that friend of yours that just won't go away. Right? but then he's no longer a friend of yours, or she's no longer a friend, but they're still there, so they're like, get to him, like, we don't want you here anymore. It's like that outcast in the group, right? And I don't mean to call all Israelis or Jews that, but sadly the institution has caused that, okay? So Israeli prime ministers have even them themselves have acknowledged that this is an occupation. This is not for me. I didn't quote Yasser Arafat. I don't care about him. I didn't quote Osama bin Laden. I don't care about him either. I didn't quote me or anyone from the NSU over here. Here's Ariel Sharon, Shimon Peres. All of them saying statements that, hey, we don't want this either. We want to get out of this whole occupation settlement business. So they acknowledge that this is an actual occupation. That this is not just some idea that, oh, this is not really occupation, we're just neighbors. This is an actual occupation. Next slide. I have to wrap up in just a bit, so we're going to go through this really quick. Right? I've been given a 10-minute warning, so I'm going to wrap up very quickly. So, what are some of the current challenges? Okay? What are some of the current challenges that really we're facing today? I want to talk about this with this disclaimer. Again, keep an open mind. Right? Keep an open mind about the conflict. Even if you disagree about some of the statistics, right? Even if you have your own statistics, just keep an open mind. I'm giving you one narrative, all right? If you have another narrative, if you have two other narratives, that's completely fine. Just have this one narrative, because this narrative isn't really portrayed in the media too much. Even if you disagree with that, keep an open mind. So, next slide, violation of UN resolutions. So Israel has violated over 65 UN resolutions. Over 65 UN resolutions. Doug Duff, who used to be an Israel bureau chief for the Time magazine, he's basically saying these aren't violations like you put a railroad crossing sign in instead of a stop sign. These aren't violations like you lost in the game of trick or treat with the Palestinians. It's not like simple violations. We're talking about home demolitions. I know that makes sense. Sorry. We're talking about home demolitions. We're talking about illegal settlements. We're talking about checkpoints, illegal checkpoints in Palestinian territory. We're talking about land confiscation. The UN isn't naturally just going to come up with resolution after resolution. They actually have committees that actually think about these things. They observe the situation, and they come up with resolutions to try to help other countries. Whether you think the UN is useless or not, the point is the UN has some sort of credibility in that area. Again, that's an iffy statement because of the people sometimes that they appoint on these things. But when you have 65 UN resolutions that Israel completely ignores, you have a problem. Next slide. The challenge, the path to the Israeli wall, I'll talk about this, you can go to the next slide. This is just probably the most ridiculous thing ever. Even the Israeli Supreme Court says this is illegal. The international law says this is illegal. The International Court says this is illegal. There's so many justice committees of the United Nations, they've already called this illegal 45 times over. So we don't even need the argument of let's talk about how big the wall is and how long it spans is not even an argument anymore. It's illegal. It's illegal. So you cannot justify something that is illegal. It was illegal for a reason. When you confiscate land to put your neighbor on your fence on your neighbor's land, it's not right. It's illegal. You can't do that in this country. I have annoying dogs. My neighbors have annoying dogs. Oh my God, it's this little Chihuahua. We've lived there for, I swear to you, 3 months already. We drive in, every time I get outside my door, this Chihuahua is just barking and yapping at me like I'm the first person he's ever seen in his life. I want to build a fence, but the neighbor won't let me.